The first week of free agency has wrapped up. We had some more moves here on Thursday, a bunch of moves that we're still waiting for. Let's talk about all of it here right now. NFL Spotlight starts now. Welcome in. It is the Friday, March 14 edition of the NFL Spotlight Show. I am your host, Ari Meirov. Week one of the free agency period is coming to an end. What a week it was. Started off really hot over here on Sunday. And then Monday, of course, was all the transactions. Kind of slowed down as the week went on, but we are still waiting for a bunch of things to happen around the NFL. We're waiting for a couple of quarterback decisions. We have a bunch of receivers who are still out there, and then a bunch of other second wave free agents over here who were hoping to have better markets, but they simply do not to this point. Let's talk about everything that happened here on Thursday and also some takeaways and things to look ahead for. Let me bring in my good friend Ben Allen. Ben, what is going on? What a week it was. It's crazy that it's already coming to an end, but it's been a crazy week.
Yeah, no kidding. Let's go ahead and talk about the soon to be defending Super Bowl champions, the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles have had a little bit of a quiet start here to free agency, but Howie Roseman decided it was time to take it up a notch, and they made some moves. They brought in some guys that are basically, low risk, high reward: Adoree Jackson, Joshua Uche, AJ Dillon. So they've definitely got, if you're following your feed, you're a big fan of the quads there now in Philadelphia. What do you think of the moves here? And do you think that these are things that are going to actually really bolster their roster for the upcoming season?
I think the way I look at this is just the strategy the Eagles are having over here. We spoke about compensatory picks over here the other day. The NFL awarded those picks for this upcoming draft earlier this week. And the way the Eagles are operating is they're only going to sign free agents over here who are not going to affect the formula. Like you mentioned, AJ Dillon, Josh Uche, who signed here on Thursday. Adoree Jackson also signed here on Thursday, 1 year, $2.5 million. Those deals all being such cheap contracts will not affect their compensatory picks over here in 2026. So the vision over here by Harry Roseman and the Eagles is we're going to sign these free agents if they're willing to come over here for cheaper contracts, potentially be contributors for our organization. Meanwhile, we're also going to be able to hold on to our extra picks that we're going to get over here in 2026. I told you this the other day. There are some teams who take this compensatory pick formula very, very seriously. The Eagles right now, for 2026, they lost Milton Williams, they lost Josh Sweat, they lost Isaiah Rodgers, they lost Oren Burks. They might lose Mekhi Becton as well. Because of that, they're currently projected to get a third-round pick, a fourth-round pick, a sixth-round pick, and a seventh-round pick next year. And maybe one of those picks even bump up over here if Mekhi leaves for a big contract. So they are essentially positioning themselves right now to, we won the Super Bowl. We have so many high-priced players on our roster. We can't keep everyone. We have to find this cheaper talent over here. And we're going to find that cheaper talent through the draft by getting these extra draft picks, by letting these guys go. And on top of that, we're going to find cheaper talent over here on the free agent market because there's a lot of guys over here in that second wave or guys who are coming off injuries like an AJ Dillon who will not have the market they're expecting. And as a result, we could convince them to come to Philadelphia, join us over here, Super Bowl champions, great coaches, great team, great organization, and essentially they're able to continue to build for the now and for the future. So I love what they're doing over here in Philadelphia. I don't think they're done at all. We've seen them make two trades as well by trading, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson away to get Kenyon Green, who could be a contributor on the offensive line. They flipped backup quarterbacks going from Kenny Pickett to Dorian Thompson-Robinson. We all know Howie Roseman does not sleep. He's always working the phones and trying to make moves. I do believe they're trying to make a couple of trades as well. There's Dallas Goedert out there who has been mentioned as a potential cut candidate. We'll see what to do with him. I think Bryce Huff was probably the one free agent signing from last year who simply did not pan out. I believe he's probably available out there right now if a team is willing to trade for him, which probably are not many teams out there. But the point being, the Eagles are always trying to wheel and deal and make moves and try to build for the now and for the future. So I love what they've done so far here in free agency and how they're building right now for this current team in 2025, but as well as looking ahead to 2026, where in this upcoming draft, they have 8 draft picks. In next year's draft, the way it's looking, they're going to have double-digit picks. So we know they're going to make some more trades with those type of picks, whether it's later in the season, training camp during the year. There's a lot of things up Howie's sleeve over here that could happen at any point. They try to make this roster better and once again go to potentially be back-to-back Super Bowl champions.
Well, speaking of back, let's go to the backup quarterbacks that are definitely starting to fill up around the league. That's called a transition there. Little transition there, magic.
Love it. I love it. I love it.
Backup quarterbacks. We finally got to see Mac Jones go out to San Francisco, which everyone was looking for a few years back, but they love Trey Lance instead. Gardner Minshew is going to be taking a flyer out there with Kansas City, playing behind Patrick Mahomes. Mason Rudolph decided he had enough of Tennessee. He's going out to Pittsburgh again, because why the hell not? Brandon Allen to the Titans, Kyle Allen to the Lions, Taylor Heineke is staying with the Chargers. And there's still some other guys out there right now that are of note. Some interesting guys, maybe an Aaron Rodgers type. What do you make of the guys that are still out there for the quarterback options? Which of them are going to be actually live, real starting quarterback options, and which are going to be joining the ranks of backup quarterbacks?
Well, yeah, I mean, Thursday was the backup quarterback day here in the NFL. Kind of started Wednesday night with the Mac Jones deal, actually, but Thursday was when a lot of other guys went off the board. You mentioned all of them: Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson. Those are kind of the starters who are still out there. We're still waiting for Aaron. He goes on his pace. Well, we obviously know the Steelers. We know the Giants. We know the Vikings are lurking. I'm still not buying it. We'll see. Obviously, the thing is very, very fluid. Russell Wilson met with the Browns yesterday. He's meeting with the Giants today. Don't expect any deals to get done with those teams until Aaron decides first. So a lot of moving parts, but the backup quarterback is where it got very interesting. Gardner Minshew going to the Chiefs. I found that one to be the most interesting simply because I think the Chiefs and Andy Reid specifically, and Patrick Mahomes as well, really enjoyed having Carson Wentz in the building last year. And from what I understood in the exit meeting after the Super Bowl, when the players leave, Andy Reid told them, "We would welcome you back over here, but I do believe you're somebody who could be a bridge quarterback somewhere in the NFL." So he told Carson to go look around and talk to other teams before maybe circling back over here in Kansas City. Of course, the circling back clearly took too long for them, and they go to Gardner Minshew. But I do know Carson, who's still a free agent, he has spoken to the Tennessee Titans, who have the #1 overall pick, have Will Levis there. They also signed Brandon Allen over here on Thursday. So we'll see if maybe that becomes an option for him. But there are still some other backup type of quarterbacks or bridge quarterbacks who are still available. We're waiting for Jameis Winston, who I think at one point last year when he was playing well in Cleveland thought he could for sure become a bridge quarterback. Then, of course, the way it all ended, it's like, I forget about it. So he's still out there. Maybe he's an option in Minnesota. We'll see. I look at a guy like Joe Flacco. He just took a visit with the Giants. So if the Giants strike out on Rodgers and Wilson, like, they have to find some sort of veteran. So maybe Joe Flacco becomes an option over there. So he was in their building there on Thursday taking a visit. We have Cooper Rush, who started a bunch of games this past year in Dallas. He's still out there. Maybe he goes to back to Dallas to continue to back up Dak Prescott. Trey Lance, former #3 overall pick, he's still available. Drew Lock, who, because of what he did in week 16 or 17, beating the Colts for the Giants, that's the reason why the Giants right now do not have the #1 overall pick, but he is still out there. So this backup quarterback market, it's still developing. There's still more guys out there. And we know how important that position is, because as soon as you lose your guy, you better have someone ready behind him or your season is completely over. So that's kind of where things stand right now. I think the one team that every agent out there who has a backup quarterback is looking at is Minnesota, because of Kevin O'Connell and Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson, the bookend tackles, and the reality that we don't know what JJ McCarthy is. So every agent would love to go to Minnesota and send their quarterback there, but the Vikings are still having those back channel conversations, trying to figure out how they progress over here after losing both Darnold and Daniel Jones. So that is definitely a storyline that we're still watching over here on Friday and potentially going into the weekend.
All right, let's move on to the New England Patriots. They've got a lot going on here right now. And one of the biggest moves is they are going to be releasing David Andrews. He's been with the team since 2015. He is a 7-time captain, 2-time Super Bowl champion. They decided they're going to be moving on, though. Why are you surprised that this is the timing of this, that they're just saying see ya when they've got such a young team and will soon be a second-year quarterback there?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't really say I'm that surprised by it. I mean, Andrews last year missed the remaining 13 games of the year after starting the first 4 games with a significant shoulder injury, which he is still recovering from. So there's obviously the injury, and there's this idea over here that, listen, he'll become a free agent, check what's out there. But there is a belief out there that he could also maybe just call it a career, his entire career with the Patriots, and move on from there. It would be kind of similar to what the Patriots once did a few years ago when they released Julian Edelman, and everybody went like, oh my God, Julian Edelman become a free agent, and then he retired a couple days later. So I could see that happening over here with David Andrews. But for him, former undrafted free agent, really one of the great players there in New England. And it's crazy because these last 3 days or 2 days, we've seen a lot of these Patriot players who have been there for, close to a decade move on over here. So we saw Jonathan Jones, the cornerback, leave after 9 years. We saw Dietrich Wise, their pass rusher, leave after 8 years. And now we have David Andrews, who is getting released and potentially retiring over here after 10 years. And it kind of makes the entire situation in New England very interesting because they really have to figure out this offensive line over here because they tried to sign a left tackle over here in free agency. They were in on Dan Moore. That price got too expensive for what they were looking at. They were in on Jalen Moore, the Chiefs, and that situation was more appealing to him at $15 million per year. They still have a hole at left tackle. They did sign Morgan Moses to be their right tackle, but they have Michael Owenu, who's likely to be a guard. Left tackle is wide open. David Andrews now getting released. Makes center a little bit wide open. Maybe they go with Jake Andrews. I'm not really sure if that's somebody that they're ready to move forward with. And then they have Cole Strange likely at left guard, the former first-round pick, but he's also been unhealthy for the most part. So that offensive line really needs some work over here. And I think maybe they'll add another guy over here in free agency, some guy just to be for depth. But that really makes the number 4 overall pick in April's draft very interesting because we know when it comes to Mike Vrabel and also Josh McDaniels, the new offensive coordinator, the offensive line and the trenches and having protection is very, very important. So we're going to see what they do over here. But clearly they knew something about David Andrews over here, that it was time to move on. The health has been a problem. He's had some other, I believe it was a blood clots issue a couple of years ago, which he fully recovered from. But it does sound like his time in New England is over and potentially his career as well. And if it is, he will be a player who will be joining the Ring of Honor at some point of here in New England.
Well, the offensive line isn't the only thing that the Patriots are trying to fix. They got to get this wide receiver room figured out. They've missed out on all the high, level wide receivers, the DK Metcalf, some of those guys that have been connected to being on the market. So they are currently riding with the guys that they have. And then they brought in Matt Collins, who for some reason just wants to stay shoeless in cold locations. So they need to figure out who's going to be that number 1 wide receiver for their young quarterback. What do you think they're going to do to be able to address this?
I just want to give a bit of a big picture look over here at what the Patriots have been trying to do over the last year and a half over here when it comes to the wide receiver position. Last year, for agency, they offered the most money of anybody to Calvin Ridley, and he ended up going to Tennessee. Then when Brandon Ayuk was going through his entire trade request and getting out of San Francisco, which ended up resigning there, no team offered more money than the Patriots, and Ayuk was like, nah, I don't want to go there. And then also this offseason, Chris Godwin, the top available free agent wide receiver, they offered him the most money. We mentioned this on Monday's episode or Tuesday's episode. They offered him by far the most money. He signed for 3 years and 66. The Patriots were willing to go as high as 28, 29, $30 million per year. And Godwin was like, nah, I'm going to stay here in Tampa Bay, where I've been my entire career with Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans, and, no state tax, instead of moving to Massachusetts where there is tax and it's colder and all of that, even though the money was going to be more regardless of tax. So they've been trying to figure out this receiver situation for over a year, and they've just not been able to get that big fish over here in New England. We know they drafted 2 receivers last year, Polk and Baker, kind of disappointments in their first year as rookies. So they're not going to stop over here because they know Drake May is their future. He showed some flashes last year, but they worked so much on the defense over here in free agency of all the moves that they made. Carlton Davis, Milton Williams, and Robert Spillane, and some other guys that they added, Harold Landry. They only added like a Morgan Moses and a Mac Hollins when it comes to the offensive side of the ball. So they're going to have to figure that out over here in the coming days and weeks, because the receiver room right now, it is a big question mark. Like, what are they going to do when it comes to that? Do they draft a guy at number 4? We talked about offensive line a second ago. Do they reach for a receiver there at number 4? I don't think there's a receiver in this draft who's really worthy of being a top 5 pick. So what do they do when it comes to that? Are they going to make some sort of blockbuster trade? Are they going to sign a Cooper Cooper Kupp, who as of this recording is still available and has interest from 5 or 6 teams over here, and his market does appear to be hot. What they do at that receiver position is still one to watch because they've been swinging and missing over the last year over here. Even with the potential that Drake May has, they've still been unsuccessful. So that is still one to watch. We still have a bunch of receivers here who are still free agents from, Tyler Lockett, besides for Cooper Kupp, Tyler Lockett, Stephon Diggs, Keenan Allen, who I believe wants to be on the West Coast, so unlikely for him, Amari Cooper, Brandon Cooks. All those guys are still out there, and the market for them has just not been there. So maybe they're able to add a guy over here on the cheap, but they really want to get a guy who's young and could grow with Drake May. I don't really know who that guy is right now.
Looks like they're going to have to find him in the draft then. All right, finally, we got to touch on the Cincinnati Bengals and what's going on there, because it seems like they're at a standstill with everything I've been hearing as far as T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Trey Hendrickson. None of them have the long-term deal in place. None of them seem too happy about it. Hendrickson in particular, he has the outstanding trade request. Is there any update on a potential trade partner or what the resolution to the situation is going to be?
Yeah, so the trade situation is interesting because it was about a week ago when he got that permission to seek a trade, and his agent and the Bengals, they've been working together on, what, let's keep this cooler heads prevail over here. But the one team that had interest and was willing to do, there was a few teams who were interested, but the one team that maybe they thought maybe they could get to make this happen was the Buffalo Bills. I don't think the Bills and Bengals would have actually been able to work out a trade just because they are such competitors here in the AFC, but the Bills ended up pivoting to signing Joey Bosa, so they're out of this. The Commanders, they were interested, but they just traded for Laramie Tunsil. They're kind of limited on picks. Now, Atlanta Falcons have been mentioned as well, but that's kind of cooled down over here. The teams that would be interested in Trey Hendrickson is kind of dwindling over here. And again, there's 3 pieces to tango here. There's getting a team that wants Trey, a team that's willing to pay Trey the money he wants, and a team willing to pay the Bengals what they want, which is believed to be a first-round pick and more. So that's a pretty expensive asking price over here, as well with the asking price of Trey Hendrickson, which is believed to be at the top of the market or close to the top of the market of where some of these elite pass rushers are getting. So the idea of this trade actually coming together is starting to feel very, very difficult for it to happen over here. So I'm kind of starting to wonder over here, do the two sides try to restart talks over here on an extension? They were just so far apart last time, and I don't know how they're going to bridge that gap. We'll see what ends up happening over here, but the trade request happened, the approval happened, and now that he got it, it's like this is kind of difficult right now, and it's just not happening. So we'll see what ends up happening. It's a bit of a fluid situation. As for Jamar and T, I was kind of waiting for this week to go by and talk about this. The fact that T. Higgins, who was franchise tagged, who was clearly frustrated about it, had this week happen when all these other receivers are available and Chris Godwin signs and Devontae Adams signs and they get these big deals. I was wondering, is there going to be a point where, T does something publicly and makes a request or puts out a weird tweet or does something, and for the week to go by and nothing happens? That's just me thinking that there's progress being made. I don't know how true or where they are right now when it comes to this, but I feel like T. Higgins, who has been frustrated for multiple years now, dating back to after his 3rd year when he became eligible for an extension, for him to remain this quiet throughout this entire week, the new league year, all the teams are spending money, the money is drying up. For him not to say anything just gives me the sense that maybe, just maybe, there's progress being made over there. So we'll see what ends up happening. We'll obviously talk about this more over here, probably early next week, to see if anything, does happen, if there's any new reports, if there's any tweets out there or anything. But the fact that this week has come and gone so far with no reaction from T or Jamar, specifically T, tells me maybe, just maybe, talks are ongoing over here. Maybe it's moving in the right direction. So that's just a bit of a takeaway for me. But Trey right now is in no man's land, and T and Jamar, maybe something's going on, and we'll find out for sure soon.
If you haven't already, make sure you hit subscribe. Go to YouTube, sub to us. We need to build up the sub numbers here. You guys, we've got so many listeners out there on X. Come over, dip your toes in the water. Subscribe here too. Get Ari all over the place. It's wonderful. If you don't have anything else, I'm gonna go to bed.
Yeah, that'll do it here for our Friday March 14 edition of the NFL Spotlight Show. What a week it was, and there's plenty of more moves here to happen around the NFL. Maybe, just maybe, it's going to happen over here over the weekend. So, like Ben said, please subscribe here on YouTube. Stay updated on everything happening around the NFL on X at My Sports Update. And we will be back here Monday morning, once again, going around the NFL, talking about everything going on around the league, what happened over the weekend, and much more. We will see you then.